Welcome back to the ninth installation of us keeping tabs on various NFL backfields and the trends in terms of snap, rush, and target share from week to week compared to what we've seen on the season. We begin with the Vikings backfield. In this one, Aaron Jones was easily the leading running back. However, he was relatively inefficient. His 21 carries went for only 64 yards, averaging 3.0 per carry and no touchdown. Cam Akers took over Ty Chandler's role, interestingly enough. Ty Chandler didn't play in this one, and he had 6 for 46, 7.7 per carry, no touchdown for him either, but very efficient, even though it was only 6 carries. Uh, so that is something to watch for the future. Through the air, Aaron Jones had 4 targets, 4 for 18. Not insanely efficient, but fine. And then Cam Akers on 2 targets went 2 for 7. And so we saw that Cam Akers, after being traded for, uh, directly took over Ty Chandler's role. And so that is interesting to see. On the season, Aaron Jones has played 62% of the snaps, and this one he played 75%. So an increase there, but not as high as it was this past week. Ty Chandler's played 29% of the snaps on the season, and this one didn't play any. And Cam Akers, after being traded for, played 22%. And so when we compare Cam Akers to Ty Chandler, on the season, Chandler's averaged 29%. Cam Akers in this one played 22%. It could be him getting acclimated to the offense. It could just be game script dependent. We'll have to see about that, but it is interesting to see that Ty Chandler's role wasn't quite filled in terms of to the average by Cam Akers in this one. So we'll keep tabs on that. On the season, Aaron Jones has had 55.43% of the rush share, and this one saw 65.63, so an uptick there. On the season, Ty Chandler's had 24.13% of the rush share, and this one Cam Akers saw 18.75, so a slight decrease there as well. And on the season, Aaron Jones has had a 14.49% target share, and this one saw 12.12, so a slight decrease, but nothing crazy. And on the season, Ty Chandler's had a 3.58% target share, and this one Cam Akers saw 6.06. And so in terms of the passing game volume, Cam Akers did see an uptick in terms of the Ty Chandler role. And so what can we conclude? Well, Aaron Jones is obviously still the RB1 far and away, no question about it. But it appears as though Cam Akers is the direct handcuff now to Aaron Jones. And depending on his usage from week to week, we'll have to see how much, if any, it increases. He may be a desperation flex play, depending on how efficient he can be, if he gets any goal line work. Probably a desperation flex play once again, but we will keep tabs on this backfield. But for now, Aaron Jones is by far and away the lead back and the only guy you want to be starting in your starting lineups. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals backfield, I was a billion% wrong about Chase Brown. He went off in this game. He was a completely featured back in the absence of Zach Moss. He had 27 rush attempts for 120 rushing yards. 4.4 per carry isn't anything crazy, but that's pretty solid. And 0 touchdowns. But through the air, he also saw a good amount of volume. On 5 targets, he went 5 for 37 with a receiving touchdown. Yeah, that is a massive week. Now, when we think about the Bengals roster, while Zach Moss is on IR now, they did trade for Khalil Herbert. I'm going to guess while Herbert gets caught up with the offense that Chase Brown's going to see more of a prominent role in the backfield. But I'm not sure, and I really don't think with them trading for Herbert that they plan on giving Chase Brown anywhere close to this level of utilization on a week-to-week basis. But I think it's definitely fair to expect him to have a larger share than he saw pre-Zach Moss. Looking at the season, Zach Moss played 62% of the snaps. In this one, he didn't play, obviously. Chase Brown saw 40% on the season, and this one saw 80%. That is awesome. Khalil Herbert obviously hasn't played yet, so I'm not going to mention him. And so on the season, Zach Moss saw 42.17% of the rush share, and Chase Brown saw 42.81%, so right on par there. Well, Chase Brown took over both roles and basically combined for what they would have totaled with 87.1. And then through the air, Zach Moss saw 10.06% of the target share through the first 8 weeks. Chase Brown saw 8.97. And this one he saw 13.51%. So not doubling per se, but very solid. and more than either Zach Moss or Chase Brown saw in terms of their averages. And so that is awesome. What can we expect in the future? I do think that Chase Brown is going to easily lead this backfield in terms of a committee approach. I think he's going to be potentially, at least for the meantime, a really high upside RB2. We'll have to see as Khalil Herbert earns more playing time, at least probably, what his volume looks like. But the sky is the limit in the meantime. And then for Khalil Herbert, if he is able to get a good amount of volume, he might end up being a fine flex play, but I would be very hesitant in terms of playing him until we really see that he has an established role in this offense. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. In this one, Travis Etienne was the leading rusher despite only having 3 attempts. He had 24 yards, 8.0 per carry. Tank Bigsby was the leader in terms of rush attempts from the backfield. However, his 8 attempts only went for 22 yards, averaging 2.8 per carry with no touchdown. And D'Ernest Johnson was also put in there, 2 for 6, 3.0 per carry. And so basically the only guy who was efficient was Etienne, but it was only 3 attempts. Through the air, Etienne had 3 targets, including 2 receptions for 6 yards, so definitely a game to forget. D'Ernest Johnson, on his 1 target, didn't haul it in. And then, as is generally the case, Tank Bigsby wasn't involved in the passing game. And so when we take a look at their season averages, Tank Bigsby's played 35% of the snaps, and this one saw 52%, so an uptick from his average. Etienne's averaged 39%, and this one saw 31%, so a decrease there as well. And on the season, D'Ernest Johnson's played 26%, and this one played 24%. A slight downtick, but relatively close to the season averages. But the main takeaway, and it could just be a one-game thing while they're easing him back, but it is interesting to see that Etienne was much less utilized than Tank Bigsby, specifically on the ground. That will be something we need to keep track of. When we take a look at the season rush share averages, Bigsby's had 40.45%, and this one saw 44.44, so an uptick for him. Etienne saw 32.46 on the season, and this one only saw 16.67. That is concerning if you're an Etienne owner. And D'Ernest Johnson's had 13.2% on the season, and this one saw 11.11. Slight decrease, but relatively close to the average. When we take a look at the target shares, Bigsby saw 2.24% on the season. Wasn't targeted in this one. Etienne saw 8.58% on the season. He saw 10% in this one, so a slight uptick, but still relatively close. And it is good to see if you're an Etienne owner at least that he's kept his role in the passing game. That was giving him a lot of his floor. And D'Ernest Johnson on the season has had 5.42%, and this one saw 3.33, so a slight decrease for him as well. And so what can we ascertain? Well, the Jags were trailing in this game, but even with that being the case, Tank Bigsby easily outcarried Travis Etienne, more than doubled his rush attempts. And so if they are winning games, that could be concerning potentially for Etienne in terms of his total volume. We will have to keep tabs on that. And then also, D'Ernest Johnson keeping around a 25% snap share, including getting some rush attempts and a target. That is concerning for Etienne as well. I do want to see a larger sample size after his return from that hammy. But as far as this backfield's concerned, I think in game scripts in which the Jags are either neutral or somehow if they were ever to be favored, that Bigsby is potentially an RB3 with upside when they're all active. Etienne has gone from being an RB3 that was a really safe floor play but really lacked the ceiling to potentially being a desperation flex play if this continues. And then D'Ernest Johnson really doesn't need to be rostered unless you're in a deep league. But yeah, this backfield we will definitely need to keep track of, because if Etienne really has lost his role, that is extremely disconcerting. And now taking a look at the Packers backfield, Josh Jacobs saw 13 carries for 95 yards, 7.3 per carry, no touchdown, but very efficient for him. Emmanuel Wilson, after beginning the season being incredibly efficient and then having his efficiency plummet the past couple weeks, was awesome in this one. 4 carries for 28 yards, 7.0 per carry with a touchdown. Good to see. But Chris Brooks is starting to get some playing time in this offense. He only saw 2 carries in this one for 13 yards, but that is 6.5 per carry. And so we will have to keep tabs on his utilization. It would really more so, in my opinion, affect Emmanuel Wilson, but still. When we take a look through the air, Emmanuel Wilson on 1 target went 1 for 1, so pretty inefficient. Jacobs on 3 targets went 2 for 13. So fine, but not incredible. But look at Chris Brooks. 4 targets, 3 receptions, and 28 yards. He was not only the most efficient back through the air, but he was also the most heavily targeted. That is interesting. When we take a look at the season averages for snap shares, Jacobs has played 65% on the season, and this one saw 55, so a slight decrease in utilization. Interesting. Emmanuel Wilson went from 28% on the average for the season to 20, so a decrease for him. And Chris Brooks went from 7% up to 26%, so definitely a huge uptick for him. When we take a look at the average rush shares, Jacobs has had 56.58 through the first 8 weeks, and this one saw 56.52, so basically spot on. But look at Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks. Emmanuel Wilson saw 22.09% on the season, and this one, that went down to 17.39. Meanwhile, Brooks on the season has 4.28%, but in this one saw 8.7. So it appears that he is directly taking from Emmanuel Wilson. When we take a look through the air, Josh Jacobs has had a 7.75% target share throughout the first 8 weeks. In this one, it went to 8.11, so basically the same. Emmanuel Wilson, though, 4.95% on the season, and this one saw 2.7. But look at Chris Brooks. And to be fair, Chris Brooks is a little bit influenced by sample size. He hasn't played some of the games this season. But on the season, 0.04%, and this one 10.81, leading all backs. And so what can we conclude? Josh Jacobs is far and away the RB1, a must start every week. Nothing, in my opinion, is going to change in that regard. But it is a real battle as to who the handcuff is for Josh Jacobs. After being incredibly efficient throughout a lot of the beginning of the season, Emmanuel Wilson went through a slump but was awesome this past week, including a touchdown. But Chris Brooks is starting to earn more playing time, and through the air, he was by far the most efficient back. And so in terms of the backup role, we definitely need to keep tabs on this backfield. And so moving on to the Rams backfield, this was the Kyren Williams show. 22 carries for 69 yards. Pretty inefficient, 3.1 per carry and no touchdown. Interestingly enough, this was the only game so far this year where he hasn't scored. I bet he returns to scoring as soon as this next week. But Blake Corum only had 1 attempt, and he lost a yard on it. So he netted you negative fantasy points in this game if you, for some reason, started him, with no touchdown, obviously. Through the air, though, Blake Corum not targeted either. Kyren Williams went 3 targets, 1 for 26, so quite efficient with his only reception, but failed to haul in 2 of them. But when we take a look at the season averages for snap share, on the season, Kyren Williams has played 86%. Look, 99% in this one. You want to talk about a featured back? That is as featured as it gets. And on the season, Blake Corum's played 8%, and this one only saw 1. Obviously, they're probably not going to have too many sets where they have multiple backs in the same game. When we take a look at the average rush share on the season, Kyren Williams has had 75.69, and this one saw 91.67. Just like with his snap percentage, that rush share is featured back territory, obviously. On the season, Blake Corum's had 11.58%, and this one only saw 4.17. Sharp downtick for him. And on the season, Kyren Williams has had a 10% target share, and this one saw 7.14, so a slight decrease, but nothing crazy. And Blake Corum on the season has had 0.69%, and this one wasn't targeted, so slight decrease, but he's generally not targeted too often. And so what can we conclude? Kyren Williams, still an elite RB1. Blake Corum, a pure handcuff with no upside, at least in this current moment, unless there's an injury to Williams. And yeah, really not much to glean from this backfield. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. I love doing these backfield breakdowns where we keep tabs of the average snap, rush, and target shares of multiple NFL backfields and then compare that to what we see in the current week. So if you want to see more content like this and you want me to continue charting out all of these backfields each and every week, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. And now we're taking a look at the Giants' backfield. Tyrone Tracy. In this one, he saw 16 carries for 66 yards. Not insanely efficient, but 4.1 per carry is fine. No touchdown for him either. Devin Singletary was the only other running back in this one. He saw 7 carries for 33 yards. 4.7 per carry, technically more efficient, but no touchdown for him either. And so Tyrone Tracy, obviously the preferred back in the run game for the Giants at this point. When we take a look through the air, Singletary wasn't targeted. Tyrone Tracy only saw 1 as well, though, and he went 1 for 3, so pretty inefficient. And so, yeah, Tyrone Tracy is the real deal and is getting treated as if that's the case. When we take a look at the average snap shares, Singletary's played 71% on the season, and this one only saw 28%. Tracy on the season has only seen 20%, and this one saw 72%. And Eric Gray on the season has had 20%, and this one didn't play at all. Interestingly enough, though, when we take a look at the Singletary versus Tyrone Tracy in this week compared to their averages, Tyrone Tracy looks to have completely incurred the Devin Singletary role. On the season, Singletary's averaged 71%, and this one, Tracy played 72%, so spot on. And when we take a look at Devin Singletary, it looks as though he's basically in either the Tracy or Eric Gray role, really the Tracy role. A slight uptick in terms of his snap percentage compared to the average for Tracy, but still. When we take a look at the average rush shares throughout the first 6 weeks, Singletary's had 61.8%, and this one saw 22.58%. And Tracy saw 22.85%, and this one saw 51.61%. So Tracy, in this game specifically, saw a little bit less than the average for Singletary for the season, but Daniel Jones also had 7 attempts in this one, so it is slightly influenced. And Eric Gray on the season saw 10.47% and didn't receive a snap in this one, so obviously he didn't have a rush attempt. And so when we take a look at the average target share, Singletary on the season has had 8.9, and this one wasn't targeted. And on the season, Tracy's had 2.73%, and this one saw 3.85. And on the season, Eric Gray saw 1.13, didn't play in this one. Really, this game is kind of an outlier in terms of there being a lack of usage in the passing game. Basically, in the entire first half, all they did was run. I think Daniel Jones had, 4 or 6 total pass attempts in the first half. One of the more interesting game plans I've ever seen, because in the second half, basically all they did was pass. So they lost. So the game plan didn't work. And so, yeah, Tyrone Tracy is definitely the preferred back in this timeshare. He is by far and away getting most of the rush share. In general, he's getting a little bit more receiving volume, but this is an outlier game. And so Tyrone Tracy, in my opinion, is on a weekly basis a mid to high end RB2 with, RB1 upside. And Singletary at this point, a desperation flex if you are in dire need of a running back. But yeah, and Eric Gray's out of the picture. So this is Tyrone Tracy's backfield. He's earned it, and until something drastic happens, it's going to continue to look like this. And so now we're looking at the Dolphins' backfield. Devon Achane in this one was pretty efficient. On 12 carries, he saw 63 rushing yards, 5.3 per carry with a touchdown on the ground. Raheem Mostert went 10 for 56, 5.6 per carry, no touchdown for him. And Jalen Wright, a week after McDaniel stating that he was going to see more action, did, although it was a day to forget for him. He went 6 for 18 on the ground, no touchdown, average of 3. Although, basically in every other game recently, he has been by far the most efficient back. So I do think this is an outlier in terms of the efficiency for him. When we take a look through the air, Raheem Mostert on 2 targets went 2 for 32, so he was incredible through the air on a limited sample size. But Achane, once again, heavy utilization. Saw 8 targets, the most of anybody on the team. He went 8 for 58 and a touchdown. Beautiful. We love to see this usage. We don't want him to take the pounding on the ground in terms of getting a massive percentage of the rushes. That's just going to break him down. But we love to see the utilization through the air. When you take a look at the average snap shares, Devon Achane averages 56% on the season, and this one played 69%, so an uptick. On the season, Raheem Mostert's seen 25%, and this one saw 23%, so a slight downtick for him. And Jalen Wright on the season has played 21%, and this one played 15%, so a downtick for him as well. And so both of them saw their shares decrease so that Achane could see an increase. When we take a look at the average rush shares on the season, Achane's had 40.7%, and this one saw 38.71%. Slight decrease, but basically the same. Mostert's seen 18.49%, and this one saw 32.26%, so a huge uptick for him. And on the season, Jalen Wright's seen 14.41%, and this one did see 19.35%, so an uptick for him as well. Looking through the air, Achane on the season has had a 15.14% target share, and this one, look at that elite wide receiver 1 utilization. 29.63% target share. That is ridiculous. Mostert on the season has had 2.59, and this one saw 7.41, so an uptick for him. And Jalen Wright's really hasn't been utilized through the air at all. And so, yeah, Devon Achane, a lead RB1 on a week-to-week basis with a tremendous amount of upside. Any game in which Tua has played, he's had a fantastic week. Mostert is, a fine RB3 kind of flex play. You'll be happy if he scores a touchdown. And at this point in time, Jalen Wright, without an injury to either of the other two, you definitely don't want to play him. But in the event either one of them does sustain an injury, Jalen Wright does have a ton of upside. Moving on to the Raiders' backfield, after what had been the Madison show for a couple of weeks, things did not go his way in terms of utilization. He did see the most rush attempts with 9. He went for 36 yards, averaging 4.0 per carry. He was the most efficient back, to be fair, with no touchdown. But Amir Abdullah, 4 for 12, 3.0 per carry, not very efficient either. But look at Zamir White. After really barely being utilized at all, and this one saw 6 attempts, he only had 10 yards, so he was once again the worst running back on this team, but he did score a touchdown. And so it is interesting to see that after their head coach stated that they would get him more involved, that they did. So that is good to see in terms of being able to trust what he's going to say. But overall, a day to forget for basically all of the running backs. And I mean, Zamir White got lucky with a rushing touchdown. Looking through the air, though, neither Zamir White, but especially Madison, even saw a target. That is strange in my opinion. And this one, Amir Abdullah saw 3. He went 3 for 14. Not too efficient there, but he did haul in all of his targets. Taking a look at the averages, in terms of the average snap share, on the season, Zamir White's played 26%, and this one saw 11%, so that continues to trend, or at least tread pretty low. Madison on the season has seen 53%, and this one only saw 39%, so definitely decrease for him. And Amir Abdullah, look at that. 20% on the season, 49% in this one. Interesting. When we take a look at the average rush shares, Zamir White on the season has seen 31.62%, and this one saw 28.57%, so a decrease from his season average at least. Madison on the season has seen 45.24%, and this one saw 42.86%, so basically the same. But Amir Abdullah on the season is 7.19%, and this one saw 19.05%. Huge uptick for him. On the season, through the air, Zamir White's seen 3.05% of the target share. Wasn't targeted in this one. Madison, who has been the leading receiver out of the running back room at least, has seen 9.94% on the season. None in this. And Amir Abdullah on the season has 5%, and this one saw 9.38%. And so very strange utilization. It completely defies the trends that we had been seeing for multiple weeks where Madison was the lead back. And so that goes to show, at least in my opinion, that once again, you really don't want to be starting any of these running backs if you don't have to. Madison had at least been getting the volume, so if you were going to start one, you knew which one you probably wanted to start. But at this point, Zamir White's getting rushing touchdowns, but hardly any volume and being incredibly inefficient. Madison, after being pretty inefficient but with a ton of volume, is seeing his volume decrease. And Amir Abdullah saw his role increase in terms of his snap percentage, but still received the third most rush attempts, but was the only receiver used out of the backfield. So I think this backfield continues to be a backfield to avoid at all costs. Taking a look at the Bucks backfield, Buck Irving was the leading rusher. On 7 attempts, he went for 24 yards, 3.4 per carry, and no touchdown. The Chiefs' run defense is pretty good, so it's not a surprise that he was relatively inefficient. Rachaad White saw 3 carries for 19 yards, did score a touchdown, so he was pretty efficient. Sean Tucker, though, 3 for 11, 3.7 per carry, no touchdown, pretty inefficient. So on the ground, even though it was a limited sample size, Rachaad White was the only efficient running back on the ground at least. Taking a look through the air, Sean Tucker on 1 target went 1 for 6 with no touchdown. Buck Irving on 3 targets went 3 for 10, no touchdown for him. And then Rachaad White on 3 targets went 3 for 16. And so Rachaad White on the ground and through the air was the most efficient back. But in general, this was a day to forget. Especially if Rachaad White hadn't have happened to get that rushing touchdown. Looking at the utilization of the backs, though, on the season, Buck Irving has seen 41% of the snap share, and this one saw 35%, so a slight decrease for him. On the season, Rachaad White's seen 56%, and this one saw 62%, so an uptick for him, and it looks as though he's basically took over that portion of the backfield in this specific game from Bucky. And on the season, Sean Tucker has seen 11% of the snaps, and this one saw 13, so slight uptick for him, but basically the same. On the ground, on the season averages, Buck Irving has seen 37.78%, and this one saw 36.84, basically spot on. Rachaad White's seen 33.75%, and this one saw 15.79, so basically halved. And then Sean Tucker on the season has seen 9.5%, and this one saw 15.79, so an uptick for him for sure. Looking through the air, on the season, Buck Irving averages 7.42% of the target share, and this one that went up to 9.68, so that's good to see. Rachaad White on the season has had 11.16%, a slight decrease to 9.68, but nothing too crazy either. And Sean Tucker, 2.14 on the season, and this one 3.23. And so what can we really conclude here? Well, Sean Tucker is basically an afterthought. He does have upside in the event of an injury, though. Rachaad White appears, at least in my opinion, to be the best bet every week. He is, in my opinion, their best receiver. But Buck Irving is, in my opinion, in general, the best runner of the football on this team. And so I think they continue to cap each other's upside. I see Rachaad White as kind of like a low-end RB2 with RB1 upside if he scores, or if it's, one of those weeks where he's really involved in the passing game. And then Buck Irving's kind of like a high upside flex play because if he does score a touchdown, you'll be pretty happy. But yeah, Sean Tucker's probably an afterthought at this point. Looking at the Broncos backfield, Javonte Williams led the team with 12 attempts. That went for 42 yards, 3.5 per carry, no touchdown. It was against the Ravens defense, so that is a tough matchup. For once, though, Bo Nix was not the most efficient running back. Estime got it in this one, 5 for 35, 7.0 per carry, no touchdown for him either. Good to see, though. His long of 21 definitely helped his average, though. And then McLaughlin went 5 for 10, 2.0 per carry, no touchdown for him. Michael Burton, I'm not really going to include. The chances of him in general seeing action is basically non-existent. And it was only because the Ravens were destroying them in this one that he probably even saw the field. But taking a look through the air, Jaleel McLaughlin on 3 targets went 3 for 10. Nothing special there. But Javonte Williams on 3 targets went 3 for 42 with a long of 34, no touchdown, but very efficient through the air. In my opinion, you could definitely argue that he's their best receiving back. He's been relatively heavily utilized, but he's also been pretty efficient in general. Taking a look at the season averages, on the season, McLaughlin's played 30%, and this one saw 32%, so just a slight uptick for him. On the season, Williams has played 60%, slight decrease to 54%. I would argue that the score in this game, the disparity between the two teams, probably played a factor there. And Estime on the season has played 4%, and this one saw 10%, so an uptick for him, probably the same reason. On the season, McLaughlin's seen 22.52% of the rush attempts. Saw that decrease to 16.67%. Williams on the season has 42.88%, and this one that dipped down to 40, but pretty much the same. And then Estime on the season has had 4.57%, and this one saw 16.67. So it does appear that he kind of took from both McLaughlin and Williams in this one. Taking a look at what they do through the air, on the season, McLaughlin's averaged 5.98% of the target share, and this one saw 9.09, so an uptick for him, and it appears to be at the expense of Javonte. On the season, Javante's had 14.68%, that dipped to 9.09, but still utilized, and Estime on the season has seen 0.26% of the target share. Didn't see one in this. And so Javonte Williams, out of all these backs, in my opinion, still continues to be the running back to own and play, definitely. He's, in general, in my opinion, a middling RB3 with some upside if he scores or if he sees some crazy utilization through the air in a plus matchup. And McLaughlin's kind of a desperation flex play where you really don't know what the utilization looks like on a week-to-week basis, and you probably have to have him score to take advantage of that. And Estime at this point is just a pure handcuff because if Williams went down, I do think that Estime would be the replacement. But I do think if that were to happen, McLaughlin probably takes most, if not all, of the receiving work that Javonte would have. So I do think that would definitely help McLaughlin raise his floor. And I do think that Estime would probably have a relatively limited ceiling. And finally, we have the Dallas Cowboys backfield. Rico Dowdle, a week after being sick, did return to action. And Ezekiel Elliott was disciplined, and so he was a healthy scratch. In this one, Rico Dowdle went 12 for 75, 6.3 per carry, no touchdown. And Dalvin Cook went 2 for 8, 4.0 per carry, no touchdown for him either. So easily, Rico Dowdle led the backfield in terms of the rushing volume. Through the air, that's also true. On 6 targets, he went 5 for 32 with a touchdown. We love to see the touchdown. And so it's good to see heavy utilization in the passing game and efficiency on the ground. Definitely like that. When you take a look at the snap shares, on the average, Rico Dowdle sees 37%, and this one saw 71%. So very high-end timeshare running back status, trending towards featured back territory. Elliott, obviously, 35% on the season, none in this one. And Cook, it is somewhat deceptive there because he was a mid-season addition, has seen 3%, and this one saw 9%. On the season, Rico Dowdle has seen 37.49% of the rush attempts, and this one saw 57.14, so an uptick for him. Elliott has seen 32.17%, didn't see any in this. And Dalvin Cook, same thing, limited sample size in terms of the average rush share, has seen 3.95%, and this one saw 9.52. Basically, no utilization at all. And Rico Dowdle through the air, in general, has seen 7.02% on the season, and this one saw 12.5, so double basically. Awesome. Elliott, in general, has seen 3.84%, none in this. And Dalvin Cook, 0.34%, and this one wasn't targeted. Basically, nothing too much to glean besides Rico Dowdle, a week after being sick and just happening to miss a week, it has returned to being easily the running back to own out of this backfield. I think that he's, a low-end RB2 in general, but if he does happen to score a touchdown, you're going to be pretty happy. Zeke, washed. Dalvin Cook, washed. Yeah, I really don't see this backfield changing in terms of who we can play, but we'll definitely keep tabs just in case something does switch up. All right, so that concludes the running back backfield trends for Week 9. In my opinion, the most interesting one is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars, because I was thinking that Tank Bigsby was going to overtake Etienne for getting the lion's share of the rush attempts, but it was interesting to see that D'Ernest Johnson was basically utilized the same as Etienne in this one. So I do want to keep track of that in particular, because if Travis Etienne is really seeing his volume just evaporate, that's extremely concerning. It could just be easing him back in due to the hammy, but we'll have to see about that. But yeah, I'm very curious about the utilization from game to game in the future to see if that was just a fluke for ETN or if that's going to be the norm. But which of these backfields interests you the most? Let me know below in the comment section and let me know why. But yeah, if you want to see me continue to make these videos every week, keep tabs on each one of the backfields in terms of their snap, rush, and target shares, average them out, and then get the new numbers from each week so we can compare, just let me know by liking and subscribing. I would really appreciate it, and it's a free and easy way to support the channel. Thanks.